And I'm going to start with our first presenter. I will be timing this. No, I don't have an exact time for you, but we're not going to, I'm not going to give you 3 minutes or whatever. I do have a time that I'm going to look at right here, but I will cut you off at a certain time because we can't have everybody just going as long as you want to go.
I thought we were supposed to go around and describe the table.
We will.
Okay.
We will.
That was before we ate, but that's okay.
We will let you describe your table. But what we're going to do, we're going to start presenting first. And Bonnie Black was the first person to sign this for presenting. So Bonnie?
Okay, well, that isn't my table escape, but anyway, I'll come up very briefly. And you won't need to time me because this is going to be very short. I read Greg Tucker's book on the Black Sheep Air Patrol. I loved it. It really was intriguing. I'm so glad, Greg, that you spent 30 years collecting all that information and doing research. So the other, well, no, that isn't, I don't have his book to, promote. But when I read the book, I realized that the veterans that were the active service people, my mom was an Army nurse, my dad was an Army doctor, they met in Australia. And I realized that when they went on leave, the veterans frequently went to the same place. They went to Sydney or Melbourne. And my mother went to the zoo that Greg's dad went to. And so this was the booklet. She brought it, cost $1. She bought it, and it came from the Sydney, Australia Zoo. So this kind of goes with Greg's book. The other thing is she was fascinated by Australian animals. So she had this book, she collected this, she had another book on more animals and the topography of Australia. She was actually at Oro Bay, New Guinea for 23 months. And it was Station Hospital 10, or the 10th Station Hospital. And she said when she left, when they closed it, she went to Manila. And she said she could see it, she could just vision it disappearing into the jungle because they had literally carved it out of the jungle and they had an airstrip there. But I brought this because when she was on leave and I couldn't, both my parents got back from the war and wrote the history that they could remember, and I'm so grateful. My mother did it. My dad kept a diary, a day-to-day diary about shipping over there and the months he spent. So anyway, this is the Sydney, Australia Zoo's brochure that you could buy for $1 when you were on leave and went there. And then this was a book on the Australian animals. So I brought this. My mother also bought a stuffed koala bear. So if you read Greg's book, his dad bought a koala bear and brought it back, and it was cherished. And my mom's koala bear, she would show it to us, but we couldn't play with it. It's like, this is my koala bear from Australia, and we didn't think it was real. I mean, a stuffed animal, but we knew it was, fake. But we loved it. It was adorable. It had a little leather nose. It was flat. It was so cute. Anyway, so I brought that because they just kind of go with the book. And I encourage you to read his book. It is delightful. And I just love the history of it and the history of all the men in it and so forth. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Well, I brought some stuff that was my grandfather's, and we both, my whole family, since they came here from the American Revolution. I've got a grandfather that's buried up in Lehigh, Pennsylvania, that actually fought with George Washington. His tombstone is marked us. So it's a long history of military service, all the way back, every single conflict. I've got a grandfather, third great grandfather, that's where this cane came from. He fought in the Mexican War and was wounded. And so I've got this, since I need a cane now. But what I brought to share, my grandfather fought in World War I, was highly decorated by the French Army. And this is the equivalent of a Medal of Honor from the French service. He's got 4 of these. I have this one framed, and on the back it describes what the battle was and why. He was wounded 3 days before the end of the war and spent 9 months in Quantico recuperating. And when he came back, he was gassed out and moved on a family farm in California because it was a drier climate, and lived out there, built his own house. It was a rock house, and it's a National Historic Site now. They can't tear it down. And I think you met Carson Bennett. He's from Claremont, lives in Claremont, and knows where the house is. And so we're trying to find out more about the people that actually bought it. But it's just, Claremont made it a historic site. But this is actually, Grandpa won 4 of these Medal of Honors from the French government. And it explains in the back exactly the battle and why. And then he passed out. But this is just one of 4 awards that he had. And we've got a long line of military. I classify myself as a legalized draft dodger. I was drafted, and I won't go down to Florida, talk to my dad, sorry, because he was World War II, a navigator, won the Distinguished Flying Cross. So, I wasn't for the Vietnam War, so I enlisted in the Navy. And they predated my enlistment just because I testified, so I could go back to my draft board in Chicago and say, oh, I've already signed up, and they let me out. So I'm a legalized draft dodger. But this is it, and I've got 4 of these. This is the only one I had framed. I gave this one to my nephew that fought in the Iraq War.
Okay. I believe I've got both the Stickney's names signed here and checked. Both of you doing something, or?
There's only one.
I'm gonna come up since it's our two bills.
Okay.
She's
Stickly.
She's Stickly and I'm a Stickney.
Okay,
Yeah.
I've got Stickney's what I've got here.
These are, I'm gonna take the plastic off these. These are pictures of my husband's great grandparents, right? This is Judge Bromfield Ridley and his wife Rebecca Crossway, if I get the plastic off, sorry. Ridley, you may recognize the name. He was responsible, or one of the people responsible for building the courthouse in the square. He was
Name.
Ridley,
No, the full name.
Bromfield Ridley, and this is Rebecca Crossway Ridley, so she's a Crossway. They married, I think her family was actually wealthier than the Ridleys were. They had a plantation that abutted each other, and they made their home at Fairmont, which you may recognize from the old Jefferson tour, if you've ever been on that. But he at one point was the chancellor of Tennessee during the Civil War. Am I getting this right, Bill? Correct me if I'm wrong. But we had never seen it. We'd seen pictures of him. What?
He was the judge
At the courthouse, right. He had a son who was also Bromfield Lewis Ridley, that we hear much more about. He wrote Battles and Sketches, if any of you have seen that book. He was a adjutant of one of the generals and has a whole big thing on the Civil War. But this is his wife. They both died in the same year, 1869, just after the Civil War. None of their children passed away during the Civil War. Their youngest son, Charles, was in the courthouse as a captive of the Union Army, and he was freed by Nathan Bedford Forrest in that very memorable act. So these are pictures that we've had made. We just have them blown up so we can hang them up, and probably will donate them to the society. So, any questions? You can ask my husband.
Is Ridley Road over here? Is that named after them, or do you know?
We don't, the whole Sam Ridley Boulevard and Knox Ridley, we think they're probably related. We were just looking at it this weekend to try to figure out where this group of Ridleys connects, and we haven't found it yet, because we're not that much into address. I should talk with Carol, maybe she can help us figure it out. I think can't imagine that Ridley would be here and they wouldn't be related.
I have them in the tree, the Ridley tree, so they are related somewhat.
Okay, so they are,
Ridleys.
okay, and I think we're related to Walter also, or my husband is. So, and there may be others here.
Everybody's related.
Oh,
Takes one to know one.
so anyway, that's what we brought to talk about the Ridleys, and Bill has all kinds of stories if you want to talk to him later. You know, so we'd love to hear your stories.
All right. Good. Thank you. Mrs. Sereno, as I believe you're presenting. These are new members. This is Commissioner Chanto Sereno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. He's my chairman to it. You allow me to talk more than 1 hour, I guess. But the reason I can't talk to you and today, it might be helpful all of us to understand, you know, I came from the country of Laos back many years ago. That time at camp, I was the only one walk around here on the street here in Murfreesboro, attending MTSU. I got the American airline, you know, company, which my friend worked for the American airline. That's why she secured the scholarship for me to come. Normally, many people, you know, the students from Thailand had about 60, 70 people, Vietnam, Cambodia, so on and so forth. I came only one. They said, why? Well, I said, I don't know, because that's why the scholarship helped me to come here. When I left my home country in Laos, come to Thailand by train, catch the flight from Bangkok to England, New York, and land in Tennessee, Nashville Airport. I studied dealing with education, elementary school education. After I finished, I go further. My advisor allowed me to take more classes for graduate courses. In the mid of 1975, the war in Vietnam, we call Indochina, including Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, ended in 75. In 75, well, many people fled the country, feared because persecution in Cambodia, Vietnam, and I put myself in work. You can see the picture of the boat, mainly from Vietnam. In Cambodia, Laos, you know, we have the land next to each other. Vietnam is all. Back then we called Saigon the capital of South Vietnam. Miss Tucker will be help me to understand. And when I see the family come from Denton to Nashville, probably one of the family, I was always go to the airport to meet them. I'm so happy to see refugees, either from Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos. So the Catholic Conference has representative from Nashville, diocese, with the refugee. He saw me every time the flight come with refugee. And then he said, who sponsor you to help the refugee? I said, I don't have anyone. How about gas, transportation? Yes, I just manage by myself. He said, you want me to take a job, I can give you a job. So you can have gas money to come to the airport. In fact, they gave me a part-time job. And quite a few months more refugees come, you know, from 1 to 10 to 20, 30, 40, and each one of them come with a family. I mean, family like they have the brother, sister, later on they can find sponsor to bring them here to resettle in Middle Tennessee. My job just help them with the housing, employment, place the children in school. That's my job. We call resettlement worker person, assistant. So I love to see that. And later on, the word come up, so I got the award. It's a special recognition to Chantal Surignon for your work and right time in helping the refugee find job, employment, and so on and so forth. Now, after almost 50 years, we have a record for the country probably about from Warren to Eagleview area. We have probably about 8,000 people because some of them born here, you know, some, and that is the reason you can see when you turn on TV channel 3, you can see my picture because I record new update. I try to get everything from English into my language for the person who have still limited in English. So help them to understand. And that is my story. So we have enjoyed to live here, and thank you for your support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Since 2014, Commissioner Serino has sit in the chair behind me, and we've become really good friends. In fact, it seems like every time we show up at something, it's he and I that are there, and he attends everything in this county. He's been a great commissioner for his district, and he's a good part of the county.
Very good.
Let's see who else is checked here. Ray? It's your turn now.
Yes.
Didn't know you was drinking that over there.
Yes, we were having a good time over here. First off, my name's Ray Stickney, and anyone here that grew up here, you would be familiar with Stickney and Griffiths, and that's who I am. My late husband's grandfather was Dick Stickney. So if any of you have any memories of the drugstore, I always love to hear. Some of my favorite memories are from Bill Wilson, because he always tells them like he's still 10 years old, experiencing them. And I love it because, but I love it because of the fact that that's his perspective on, my husband's grandfather and the way he was as a man and as a pharmacist. So last year I brought the pharmacy scale. This year I brought some bottles. Can any of you, if you're at a certain age, can any of you remember your grandmother or your parent even saying, do not dig in the yard in that location? Well, I grew up with a grandparent saying, you can play in the yard, you can dig anywhere in the yard, but not over there. And the reason is because obviously before landfills, before garbage pickup, glass bottles and things were separated and they were put in the ground right next to your barn, your house, a shed. And of course your grandmother did not want you digging them up because you were going to find all their treasures. Well, these are some treasures, okay? First of all, I hear people complain about how wine bottles have gotten smaller these days. Well, this is a wine bottle. All right, this is what you got. So be grateful that your wine bottle nowadays is bigger than this one, okay? The other thing that's fascinating too is this one here. This one was considered a bottle dropper, and it had you could put a dropper on it. And this one here, you would find it for some medicines, of course, what you would be thinking, eardrop medicine. Fragrances went in these kind of bottles, essential oils, anything that was a liquid that needed to be dropped, okay, whether it was on your ears or your throat or on something that made it smell good. This was that type of bottle, and it's called a bottle dropper. This one here is probably more familiar to most people if they are fascinated with bottles and that. It's the least rare one. Does this look familiar to anyone?
Somebody's been drinking under your house.
No, actually, you'd be surprised what it is.
I thought it was beer.
Anybody that cans. This is what your pectin used to come in. This is a Certo bottle, and the cool part about it is that there's actually a measurement on here that tells you all the way up the bottle how much pectin to use. So this was what if your grandmother or your mother was canning, this is what it came in before the boxes now, the convenient powdered boxes. You didn't have to mix it then, it came in a liquid, and you just poured it. The last one I love because it comes from the drugstore. And it's a beautiful color, it's one of my favorites, and I have many at home that I treasure. And this one here is what Dick Stickney would get his chemicals in. And it had a topper on it, but it's no longer because it just because of what was in here, the top fell apart. After years, it just fell apart. But this is what your pharmacist would get their chemicals to mix the medicines with, okay? But they're all fascinating. I love the colors. The three here, I actually dug out. I didn't listen to Grandma that day, and I actually dug these out of the yard. This one here came from the pharmacy. So I mixed a little Stickney and a little Wetzel in between. My maiden name is Wetzel, and I kind of mixed the Wetzel and the Stickney up this year. So it makes me feel good. Anyway, thank you so very much.
On to the other page. Hey, I come up now.
All right.
I'll set the timer on myself too. I actually brought with me tonight my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother. And my great-grandfather was born in 1857, lived to 1902. When he died of appendicitis. They brought him into Murfreesboro to the doctor, but when they got here, it was too late. So they bought a coffin and carried him back to Rockville out there, and he was buried there. The only thing is when he passed away, he had 14 children, leaving my grandmother with 14 children to raise. So his name was James Theophilus Reed. I was very fortunate they did not name me after my great-grandfather. They named me after my grandfather, whose name was Pettis, and I've been dealing with that all these years. But James Theophilus also was known as something else out in that area. He was a horseback riding, singing teacher. He went about the county, both Rutherford and Bedford County, teaching singing. And I've seen several minutes from different churches. Now you got to understand something. He didn't pick the denominations he went to teach singing. If anybody needed him, he went to teach singing. And he rode all over these different counties teaching singing. In fact, I was very fortunate. I have one of his singing books right here.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's a very old singing book. In fact, he stitched it. It had some leather on the side, and he taught round notes. I'm sure you've heard of round notes and how he taught that. But he taught singing, and it was quite interesting. He was also what I found about it, he was a member of the school commission, so he was a member of the school board. He was a farmer, and he also participated in what he said, church leadership and other things of this type. But I just happen to have a picture of him. In fact, this picture is quite old too. And there is James Theophilus, right there. So the frame itself is over 100 years old. And tonight was about the first time I've ever brought this out. It's been on my wall for 25 years. The story of me ending up with this picture, my brother actually had the picture. And he passed away, and he gave it to his son, my nephew. Well, I was at my nephew's one Christmas, And he said, would you come in here? I want you to have something. I said, what? He said, I want you to have this picture. I said, my brother gave that to you. Don't you want to keep this picture? He said, I can't. I said, why not? He said, my wife won't let me keep it. I said, why not? He said, everywhere we hang it, the eyes follow us everywhere we go. I said, and he didn't have the picture. I said, well, where is it now? He said, it's under the bed. I said, well, what's wrong with that? She won't sleep in the bed. So I ended up with the picture, and I brought it home, put it in my wall, and Granddaddy don't bother me at all. And he's done quite well. But grandmother, I still have her picture, and this is a quite interesting story here too. Her name was Judith. And if any of you knew anything about my wife, her name was Judith. So it seems to be in the Reed family, we go out looking for Judiths. But I have my grandmother's rocking chair that she rocked all those 14 children. What I've got it laying on right here was made by my grandmother, so I brought this with me. But my grandfather also sang too. But what great-grandfather did, as he, just like teaching everybody else, he used those 14 children to help teach with. And each one of them they were either a bass, they were a soprano, they were a tenor. But my grandfather could really sing. The only thing was, he always told me, he said, I never knew what I was. Because of the line of lineage in that family right there, if he needed a soprano, if he needed a tenor, he said, today, Tom, this is what you are. And he said, I got to the point I never knew what I was when I was singing. But he had a beautiful voice, he would sing. That's probably, a lot of the family is known for that. But I also have Judith's snuff can, Judith's snuff stick. She was quite what I would call the pioneer lady of Rutherford County, to raise this many children after he passed away and to keep a family fires going. And she did it. And I have that, like I said, I have that rocking chair sitting in my office, and it feels so good at times to sit in her chair and do these things. But I thought I'd just share that with you. I wanted you to see the song book and that he carried with him. There was the story that's always told in the family about he would ride on a horse, and a lot of times he would go to churches, and he seemed to dress similar to what a preacher would look like. And one day he was riding by a little country church, and people were gathered outside, and they stopped him, and they said, are you a preacher? He said, no, I'm not a preacher. He said, I teach singing. They said, could you help us? And he said, why? I said, the preacher hadn't shown up, and we're getting ready to start a funeral. He said, could you do that? He said, well, I'm a church leader. I'll be glad to help you. And he walks in the church building, said the coffin was already sitting there closed and everything. Said they get up on the stage, and one member of the church sat down beside him in the big chair up front. He sits down on the other side, and said he looks and he gets thinking. He said, I don't know who's in there. I don't know if it's a man or a woman. And said he looks over at the other person and he says, excuse me, is it today at the church? Is it sister or brother? He said, cousin. So that was always told on my granddaddy by the time he had to do this service, and he still never knew who was in there. But that's the story of James Theophilus Reed. All right, I see I've got another yes down here. Dr. Tauber, it's your turn.
Hey, fellas, am I on your list?
Huh?
Am I on your list?
Which list are you talking about? I don't think you signed in.
I didn't sign it.
Does that not sound normal? Okay, we'll make you the finale. I've got down here to be determined. Maybe that's just you. Dr. Talbert.
I brought two items of a medical nature that I want to share with you. One of the items was this collection of bleeding on barber's bowls. This was a brass barber's bowl, see the cutout here. They started out with barber's bowls in the 18th and 19th century, and they also were used to bleed a patient. You know, bleeding was the treatment of choice in the 18th century and subsequently. Interestingly enough, we still bleed for one condition, and that's a condition called polycythemia vera. That's where the red corpuscles are so multiplied in the bloodstream that it's apt to cause clotting. And the best way you can treat that is to bleed the patient. You take a pint of blood off of them, and that will dilute the blood somewhat for a few weeks or months, and then you bleed them again. And so we still bleed patients, and interestingly enough, it's for a different reason than it was in the 18th century. But this is a brass mold. This is a silver bowl here. See, these are going to be part of my contribution to the museum at the courthouse. And these will go in there. In Dr. Ransom's book, which the Baltimore County Historical Society published, we have this bleeding bowl, which belonged to me as well, and I just wanted to call that to your attention. This little bowl is somewhat unique in that it has the little soap dish here in this area. So they won't all have that, and that's unique for that. The other thing I wanted to share with you is this naked woman. Seriously, this is a Chinese medicine doll, prominently used in the 18th century. This is ivory, an ivory doll. The wife is so discreet and so embarrassed to go to the physician. She would have her husband take this doll to the physician and explain to him what was wrong with her. He would go to the doctor and say she's having abdominal pain. Maybe it's on the right side. That may have been her gallbladder, or her colon, or her liver. Maybe it was on the right side of the abdomen. That may have been her pancreas, or her stomach, or something else, colon again. Anyway, he would return and subsequently give her the message as to what the doctor felt was wrong with her. And in turn, she would have to comply, either taking the medication that he offered her, or else her husband would have to take her to the hospital and receive the treatment. I sort of think of that as, in this day and time, as the American Chinese doll syndrome. By that I mean this. We've come a long way in the past 200 years, but in some ways I sort of feel like we're slipping back. We have great technology in medicine, but you go to the doctor today and you see him, if you're lucky, probably you're going to see a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant, and that person will say, well, we need to get some lab work. We need to had to get a chest x-ray. And, well, while we had it, we get a CAT scan. And, probably we'll just throw in an MRI while we had it. We get all these tests. So you come back and see us in a week or 10 days, which he will do. And the doctor maybe will see you that time. And how are you feeling? Well, I don't feel any better. It's like I did when I came in to see you a week ago. And the doctor says, well, your lab work looks real good. You didn't see anything wrong with it. The chest x-ray was negative. And the CAT scan, it looks all right too. And furthermore, your MRI was quite good. Didn't see anything wrong with that. And he said, well, why don't you get up on the table there and let me examine you? Well, I was taught that's the first thing you do. You get a good history, and you do an examination, and then you order all of these things. So we're back to the Chinese, the American Chinese doll syndrome. We don't examine a patient until we've done all this other crap.
Good job. Tell it like it is.
That's right.
Decipher that. Oh, here we go, some excuse.
That's it. You got it.
It's Jim Transport.
Jim Transport, you got it right. Usually they say transport, so I was waiting
Well,
for
I
the
thought
end.
you were supposed to say transport, but I said,
Well-
that's not his name.
Interestingly enough, when we started with computers, I would call, maybe a bill was, billed to me, and I'd call up and they'd say, hello, who is this? And I'd say, this is Jim Transport. And they'd move the mouse over and they'd say, well, Mr. Transport, we don't have you in our system. And I said, do you have a mouse? And they say, yeah. So we'll move it over to the N and click that. And sure enough, it'd take the N out and she'd say, there you are, Mr. Transport. But I'm from an Italian background. It was Trasporto. They probably should have left the O on it. It would have been a lot easier to figure that out. But most of you, or a lot of you, are from this area. In fact, what I'm about to talk to, I'm actually wearing the history of what part of Murfreesboro is. And it was back in the 60s that I even found out that there was a Murfreesboro. And it was through Sigma Phi Omega, which was a high school fraternity, suppose. I say that around here sometimes, and people go, oh yeah, I heard about them. My daddy was in it, or something like that. But how we found out about it, in South Florida, we were looking to become a national high school fraternity. And in Florida, it was against the law. And now, if you can remember, during the Vietnam War, there were rallies against the war. They were burning flags. They were burning draft cards and undergarments too, if you remember that, ladies. They were burning certain parts of your undergarments. So when we became a charter, which was Lambda the Tall, was our chapter in West Palm Beach, Florida, that's when we found out about Murfreesboro, or I did, because Epsilon was the chapter here. And so this is one of the tags that we had on our car. And I was in, the chapter that I was in was Lambda Tall. And like I said, I'm wearing part of my stuff. So this is SPO, what would you call it? Doesn't spell it anywhere close to that. But Leanne is in the picture. She was in the Epsilon officers, their winter formals. Winter formal, and then you had a spring formal too, I guess. So, and yeah.
There was sweetheart dance, there was
Sweetheart dance. And Pat over here recognized one of the ladies, Susan Elrod. I guess that's a name that maybe you recognize. I didn't know a lot of these people, but I can tell you one funny story. When they found out that we were from West Palm Beach, and we were right there on the Atlantic Ocean, they wanted to have the national convention there. So all these fair-skinned, blonde, blue-eyed, redhead guys came down, and they thought they were going to learn how to surf over the weekend. What they did was they put baby oil on, and you can imagine what they looked like. They looked like toast when they came back, but it was so fun. And I'll say this about it. When I joined the fraternity in South Florida, it was because I wasn't able to get in the service clubs in my high school, because there was a service club that most of the kids, young men, were in sports, and I didn't play sports. There was another one that was a different group, maybe the band or something. I didn't do any of those things. My dad had a business. So when Sigma Phi Omega came and I became a pledge and I became in the fraternity, it set me on a trajectory of leadership and service and brotherhood that I probably never would have had. So I have to say that Sigma Phi Omega as a fraternity changed who I am because of what they were and what they stood for. So I want to thank Murfreesboro. I want to thank the Interfraternity Congress. No longer do we have Greeks in high school. In fact, ours was kind of interesting because we had a law against secondary school fraternities, and it went all the way to the Florida Supreme Court to make us legal, and we lost. So, but there are no Greeks in high schools anymore. There are sororities, I understand. So there again, I have these books up here. If you want to see Leanne, Guinea, Hyatt, O'Brien's picture, it's marked. Thank you very much.
Mr. Tucker. Not exactly last, you're gonna be next.
In years gone by, we added an extra dimension to show and tell, and that was bring in something that you think nobody else will know what it is and see if they can figure it out. Kind of like on the NPR, they used to have Stump the Chump. Well, I need a volunteer chump. Oh, okay, Walter. That works just fine.
Hey, Greg, this money's got Mr. Monopoly on it.
It's a hat box.
Hey, he's right on top. He says this is a hat box. Yes. In fact, it's an 80-year-old hat box from the French shop in Murfreesboro. What do you think's in that box?
A hat?
It's heavy, I tell you that much.
Weighs over 5 pounds. What do you think's in that box? It's a hat box.
It's a puppy.
I have no idea.
That was a clue.
A derby.
A derby? Well, at least you're guessing a hat. It's kind of, no.
No.
No. Yes. Well, if you brought it home and explained to your wife that you're going to use it as it's intended, she'd throw you out.
I'm going to use this as I intended.
You're gonna live with Greg.
Well, I'll give you a little better clue. Came from the railroad station.
Conductor's hat.
He's still on hats. It is engraved.
Silver.
It's engraved N, C, and St. L Railway.
So it's
Go bar.
part of a rail.
part of a rail?
Yeah.
Would you believe it if I told you it was the rear wheel of a locomotive?
It's kind of small.
It's kind of small. He's being observant. Well, I'll describe it to you. It's black on the outside and porcelain white on the inside.
And red all over. It's a newspaper.
5-pound newspaper, huh?
Yeah. Tennessee on the week.
Anybody else got a guess? Huh? Nobody? Well, I doubt that there's anybody in here who's ever used one as intended. Hey!
Cuspidor.
The real NC in St. Al says so right here. Spittoon. Last used, we think, at the railroad station in Murfreesboro. And before you attempt it, would you go outside and practice?
Wow, that's cool.
Thank you, Walter.
Always the buffoon.
Pettis, I didn't sign my name, but I just have one thing.
I'm gonna get you two. I'm getting the people that haven't put anything down. I believe we're up here. Come on up. I feel like the price is right. Come on down. Come on down. I think this is you.
A nickel.
I actually brought this, see if somebody could identify it for me. It's a bucket. It's a bucket. Yes. And it was always in my parents' house, and when I came to the Historical Society and found out there was a bucket factory in Murfreesboro, I thought, I wonder if that's one of them. So that's why I brought it. Was it or wasn't it? Dr. Talbert says it was, so made in Murfreesboro at the Cedar Bucket.
Like Antique Roadshow.
All right, Miss Pat.
All right.
Actually, I've done better with the names that are not on here than the names that are on here.
Well, I had a part of a brick to bring, and the cat distracted me because the cat wanted to go in as I came out, and it was half of a brick made on the farm where I'm living in 1869, because after the war, you know what the war was. Bricks, you made them right there on the place, and so the chimneys, central chimney, double chimney, then one on each end, and one's not standing. We went in and we were gonna correct it, and it put plywood to knock it, not to knock it down, but to see if they could loosen it. When they started hammering, it just went down. So, because the mortar was probably made from dust or lime dust and horsehair, like the plaster on the walls and the ceiling. Plaster's still there, but I made a mistake in having them wallpaper. So the wallpaper is coming down, but the plaster's still there. We should have just painted it. But my husband and I moved here in '63. His mother grew up in this house I'm in, and his grandfather built it. And Florence Elizabeth McLean was his grandmother, and Robert Andrew Smith was his grandfather who built the house. And they married in November of 1869 and moved in the first 3 rooms and then added on 2 rooms. So of course the kitchens had to be in the back, away from the house, and that's where they had a log smokehouse, and anything was going to be cooked there. And finally, in 1937, they got electricity because of FDR and running water. And it was wonderful, because my mother-in-law lived there till 1920. She never lived there with those luxuries of electricity and running water. But my question to anybody in this room who can tell me, Who was the President of the United States in 1869?
1860.
I got a bunch of historians in here. 1869, who was the President of the United States?
Grant.
Grant, you said it. Ulysses Grant. I was curious about that because I hadn't even thought who was the president. But the fact that the war caused a shortage of supplies, the only wood in 1869 for rural houses, cedar, lots of cedar, just like we have now, and tulip poplar, and it never rots. I have the original yellow poplar, tulip poplar as siding. So, they call them clapboard houses. What else they call it? Clapboard. But that's the type of siding that's there. So, were you the first one to say 1869?
You said 1869, I said Grant.
You said Grant,
Yeah.
right. Anyway, thank you.
All right, we're gonna have you to explain your tables. And I believe we'll start with this one over here.
Yeah, this is, I'm David and Kathy Hoover, and Kathy's dad was in the courthouse for a number of years, and Courtney was. It kind of ballooned, so I brought postcards and then a couple of ceramic courthouses. And this one was actually issued by the Historical Society at the bicentennial, and then she had to stop me because it just overflowed, so I had to take this corner, so that's where we are.
Great collection, very good. Over here?
Tom?
Yeah, Jim Ryan.
Okay, I didn't know I was gonna be doing this, but I'll do it. This is a foxhorn. Came from my great uncle, Robert Ralph, who lived out of Gump, and I think in his younger days, he was a fox hunter, but anyway, you can actually blow that. This, if anyone, you can see that, anyone know what this was? You can see the mechanism turn. Yes, it's a razor blade sharpener from the 1920s, I believe. That was also either my Uncle Bob's spouse or her sister. This is a old telephone, as you can tell, but this came from the old mechanic school that had 4 classrooms and 4 teachers. They each taught 2 grades, but that came from the old mechanic school that was built in the mid-1920s.
Did Lily Tomlin used to use that phone?
Yeah, I think she got it from you. Old brother mode. This is an old brother mode. Came somewhere in my family, I'm not sure. And this is an old crystal set that came from my father-in-law. But old crystal set, it needs a few parts on it, but it's been around a long time.
Okay. Over here. More bottles?
Well, I put the bottles in there just for the color, but the lighthouses, I have a collection of lighthouses. I'm originally from Northeast Ohio, right on Lake Erie. And we have the old lighthouses and the nautical theme in Ashtabula, and so I brought a little bit of myself. If you want to check it out, though, this is an actual ballast from a ship on Lake Erie, and if you don't know what these are, they hung them from the ships to balance off, okay? But this is an actual one. I have 3 of them, and but if you want to check it out, you can. And then I have a Navy, an actual Navy, old Navy telescope in here. It actually works. You can pull it out and you can play. There's been some people already playing with it. So, but just a little bit of taste from home this year. Anyway, thank you.
This was my first one. I got this in Bavaria in 1957. This is my newest one. I also got it in Bavaria in 2019. This one and this one, you can take the handles off and put them on other bottles so you can let those get hot while you're using this one. This one's the oldest one because it has the metal handle before they went to the wooden ones. And this one was run by kerosene. And that's all I know about those.
Very good. I guess that also teaches your husband to duck quite often.
Oh, he's fast.
All right, over here.
Okay, so I volunteered to do a table scape, I'll call it, but it's a collection, so I walked around the house trying to figure out what do I have a few of. And I realized I had the Roseville pottery. And this was the very first one. I have a pair of these, and these are the only pair that came from my family. They were my grandmother's on the maternal side. And the Roseville Pottery Company started in 1892, and in Zanesville, Ohio is where it started. And this wouldn't be that age, okay? Because they started a blue tinted line in 1903, but the way that they labeled the bottom of them, Roseville, some of them were incised. If they were incised label, it was 1936 to 1938. If they were raised, this is raised and numbered, then it was made in 1939 to 1954, and then they filed for bankruptcy. So I just like them because I like the fact that they're muted colors. They have flowers for decorations. I just think they're pretty. I really like them. And so I have two of these that were in the family. I purchased those. That's a pair. And the others I purchased. But one caveat, one of them is a fake. So, you might look, I know which one is a fake. You can tell me what you think. But it was interesting because when I purchased it, I thought it was just a bargain. And the guy said, it's a fake. And I went, oh, okay, well, it'll work. Because I choose vases mostly knowing what flowers I'm going to put in them. Because some vases, this is a great one. It's not the fake. Because it's upright and you can do so many arrangements in them. But anyway, I love to arrange flowers. And so this is a little collection of Roseville vases that I have.
I chose to put eagles on my table. Everybody knows how eagles are. They have a wingspan of 9 feet, wingtip to wingtip. And the one thing I wanted to do, Mr. Pettis, I wanted to give you something.
You can read it right over here.
She wants to give you something.
I want to give it to you.
Give me something.
Yes.
Yeah, something for you.
They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. Isaiah 40:31. And Mrs. Freedom, sir.
Well, thank you. That's nice.
That's very nice. And that is all I've got.
Good job, good job.
Well, this is a surprise. I did not know we were going to have to do this. We didn't do it the last year. Anyway, but Carol asked me if we'd do a table, and so I did. And this is the history of Daffodil Hill, mostly known as the Arnold Harold House. And my husband bought this house for me because he promised me 44 years before we moved here in 2018, in the 70s, that he would find me a new home because he had picked out a home for us in the 70s that I'd never seen and really didn't like.
Call me living in the doghouse for 44 years. Get out of that dog.
So we had some friends who had bought this house 7 years before we did. We bought it in 2018, moved in December 7th. I love old houses. We both love old houses. This is not the first old house we have lived in. But I've loved this, and what I brought
to show you is, it is on the historical register. And, excuse me. So, okay. It's at 1710 East Main Street between Apollo and Jupiter. It's in the center. There are 3 houses. And it is just wonderful. And when we sat down here, I brought a lot of history, a lot of stories. And it was first Captain Arnold. And we have his picture here somewhere. Right here. Here's a picture of Captain Arnold. And he owned about, what is it, 480, 600 acres? 435. 435 acres. And during the Civil War, because he was a captain, the Union Army marching into this area camped outside of Daffodil Hill, or surrounded Daffodil Hill. And his wife was a McClanahan, and related to your granddaughter? I just found that out. So that was wonderful to know that. Well, there's a book about Daffodil Hill, and it's called In Their Time. It's a great book. It's so good that a friend of mine who was in the estate sale business had a Victorian pier mirror, and it's mentioned, this book, that when Mrs. Arnold would leave the house in the front door, she would always check herself in the mirror on the right as she went out the door. So guess what? I was able to get a Victorian pier mirror and put it in the foyer. So it was just by luck. So it's an excellent book. And as you all may know, that after the Heralds lived there, I think, 104 years? Well, I believe that's what I read. It was bought by Kirby McNabb, and everyone probably knows Kirby McNabb. And he actually restored it, and he added wings to it, and a brand new Florida room, and a kitchen, and I have pictures of it before it was restored, and stories about it. So you're welcome to come and take a look at it. I picked the daffodils, and believe me, it is full of daffodils in the spring when they all bloom all over the yard and in certain landscape areas, but these are the last of them that I picked just before I came tonight. So it's just a beautiful place, and I love it. We love it. And we said that we would, when we bought it, that we'd live here 10 years and then go to the nursing home. So that's what Bill said. So, but
Is he out of the doghouse?
he's out of the dog.
It's gotta be a good.
Everyone, anybody we've overlooked? Somebody will knock on that door back there and just let it come out. As they're coming out, I also want to thank Harold. She's our program.
She'll be on press.
I wasn't overlooking you when you come around there and what you said. I want you to understand, I couldn't hear you. Tell y'all the truth, back in October, I developed a virus that really messed up my hearing. For about 3 months, I felt like I was underwater. I mean, I was totally, and in fact, IT over at the courthouse, as I served as chairman of public safety, they put me a speaker up there on the podium where I could hear Commissioner Chateau and some of them when they were making motions, because I have a lot of commissioners that mumble when they say, I make the motion or I second or whatever, and I can't tell who it is. So they put me a speaker where now I could hear really good, but it really messed me up. I was waiting to get this virus taken care of.
There she is.
Well, the virus went away. I told her I'd give her free advertisement. She said it wasn't necessary.
We have to-go boxes, so. What's the name? No company.
No company.
Okay. So if you want to take something home for someone or for yourself.
She said if anybody wants her to carry her name is Barbara Smith.
But I was told it would get better. Well, I don't feel like I'm in the water anymore, but I still, if there's a little bit of noise where I'm at, I can't get the two together sometimes. And that's what I was having here. I was getting a little bit like that, so I've got to go down to the ear person and see what we can do to fix some of this. And so, excuse me, sometimes I don't necessarily hear you the way I'm supposed to hear you. That's some of the problem. Of course, it could be I'm 75 years old too, so you got to overlook some of that at times. But then we get everybody taken care of, because this is a special night. We've learned a whole lot of history. We've seen things that, things I haven't seen. And I appreciate the spit tube.
You never used one? You never used one?
I never chewed. I helped strip a lot of tobacco, but I learned right there right quick, I don't want to deal with tobacco. I tell a lot of times, we'll have people step up to the microphone there at the commission, and they're scared to death of the microphone, and they'll push it to the side, or whatever, you can't hear them. And I told a commissioner the other night, I said, that only works, it works like a spit tune. You gotta hit it to make it work. And that's pretty much what these are. But that right there is really neat that he was at that train station, so that's special. Anything anybody would like to say tonight? That's for the business of this. Right?
I think we ought to recognize John. He's over here trying to keep everybody on target. So. There you go.
John does a lot of good things for us right here. He helps us quite a bit in scanning things for us, getting in the computer, and he's very important to us. We really appreciate him. There was a reason it was brought to my attention to make sure we get this table first, because if we don't, John doesn't have the opportunity to eat. And I wanted him to eat because he is special. I like to feed my help when they're working with me. And we think so much of John right here.
This has been a JJV production.